You have that a new assault weapons ban will have any impact on crime?
Sure. I get a glass of water or something. So let's go back to the data that we have about the first assault weapons ban. And I'm sure that folks here who are who don't like the idea of an assault weapons ban can give me studies that show the opposite, and I'd be happy to look at them. But the studies that I've looked at during the time of the assault weapons ban show that after 9 years of the assault weapons ban being in place, crimes committed with assault weapons decreased by about 2/3. That's because when crimes are committed, we obviously catalog the weapons that are used, and in that, by year 9, crimes committed with assault weapons, as defined by that bill, and obviously everybody's got a different definition of what an assault weapon is, were decreased by 2/3. Overall crime, there's a study done that looks at overall crime, which was already going down, right? So crime was sort of, violent crime was decreasing over the course of the 90s and the decade after. But there was a study that sort of held all other factors constant, controlled for all other factors, and found that the assault weapons ban had contributed to 6 or 7% of the overall drop in crime during that time. This is a stat that is interesting, but not necessarily dispositive, because you don't exactly know why this happened. But since the assault weapons ban expired, about 40% of all the mass shootings in the country's history have occurred. Now, I can't say, and nobody can say that that's because the assault weapons ban isn't on this book, but that is a startling fact that in the 8 years since the, since the 8 years since the assault weapons ban expired, 40% of the mass shootings in the country's history have occurred. Certainly makes you think. So there's data that shows that things were different during the period of time that the assault weapons ban was in place. And again, I'd be happy to look at other studies, but those are, at least the first two, are pretty persuasive studies.
Background checks are only done at firearms stores. How do you plan to enforce background checks for the guns bought on the street out of the back of a car?
Yeah, so great question, right? So this is where it gets really tough. So there's a variety of places in which guns are sold, right? So you've got federally licensed firearms dealers in which it's pretty easy to get a background check done because they're a retailer, they set up, they have a store, they can link right into the background checks system. And listen, I won't claim to be an expert on how you buy a firearm, but then you've got these bigger gun shows, which right now you're not required, if you are not an FFL, a federally licensed firearm dealer, to do a background check in those shows, but they are probably a little bit better set up to do background checks because it's an established show, and they probably can more easily have computer systems set up to do background checks for the transactions that are done there. A lot harder, admittedly, to do when you're transferring a weapon from a father to a son, right? Or to a...
I'm talking about the criminal on the street selling to another criminal.
Oh, selling to another criminal?
I'm not talking about gun shows. I'm talking about all those guns are bought illegally on the streets.
So they're violating law, right? If you said it, right. So let's say you just put a law and you said, forget how difficult it is. We're just going to say everybody that's got to transfer that's going to transfer a gun, that's going to sell a gun, has to go through a background check. Clearly, criminals that are selling them on the streets are probably not going to care too much about that law, right? So they would, though, in a lot of cases, for the first time ever, be in violation of a law. Because in a lot of cases, right, it depends on who you think is a criminal, right? If they are transferring a gun and they don't know that the person they're transferring to is a restricted person, right? No, you have to be in the business. That's not true. That's not true. That's not true. I mean, with all due respect, and I don't want to get in a back and forth, you don't need to be licensed as a federal firearms dealer to sell a gun in this country. You have to be in the business of selling guns.
If I transfer my handgun to you, I have to call the state to get an authorization number to transfer the handgun.
Listen, I'm talking about what I'm talking about is federal law does not require you to be a licensed federal dealer to transfer guns. And more to your point, though, I'm not suggesting that you put in all these laws and all of a sudden it's going to stop criminals from passing weapons to each other. I mean, and no law that you pass is ever going to eradicate the problem that you're seeking to address. So I just don't want to set up an expectation that when you're going to require everybody to go through a background check, that all of a sudden no bad guys are going to ever have guns. Of course they're going to have guns, and of course crimes are going to still be committed. And unfortunately, of course, no matter what you pass, there still is a chance that mass shootings are going to still occur. What I'm saying is that there are pretty clear, the evidence tells you this, that 40% of guns in this country are sold without background checks. The evidence also tells you that there are massive amounts of people who, when they go to buy a gun, get stopped from buying it because of the background check. So of that 40% of sales, absolutely you're right. There's going to be a percentage of them that still will not go through a background check because it is a criminal selling to a criminal, or it is a stolen firearm, whatever it is. But there will be a portion of them where the person will go through a background check for the first time, and that background check will stop bad people from getting guns. That was the circumstance in in Colorado, whereby the girlfriend bought the gun at a gun show for her boyfriend because she knew that if she went in to a licensed firearm dealer, she would be stopped from buying the gun because of a background check. And so that was an instance where had there been a background check in place, or had it been harder for her to get around the background check, that gun wouldn't have been sold. But I'm going to be honest with you, right? I mean, maybe he would have gotten the gun another way. I can never guarantee you that. But just like any law we pass, I can't guarantee you that people won't ignore the laws. I just think it's better off to have a law that we agree on, that we want enforced, even when we admit that sometimes it's not going to be enforced.
Take a few more here.